All righty. Hello, everybody, and welcome. It's a couple minutes after the top of the hour, so glad to see you all join us on a Wednesday afternoon to talk about controlling the cost of college. My name is Stacey Nemitz. I'm a senior financial advisor, a CFP professional here with Apella Wealth, and I am pleased to be joined with my college planning in-house experts, Jim Femia and Jameson McAndy, to chat with you guys today about controlling the cost of college. I know a big topic, one that's on top of mind for many households, but today we're going to really concentrate and kick off this conversation with 4 learning objectives. How this financial aid process works, what affects the price that you actually pay for college, what's the different types of aid that's available, and maybe some efficient ways to save and pay for college. This subject, near and dear to my heart. I have 2 children in college currently. Jim and Jameson are always on hand to answer my question. At Apella, we all work together. So your advisor, this is a resource. I'd like to introduce you the resource that your advisor is pulling on to get some of the information for you guys. Ask your questions. As always at Apella, we love questions. And the questions you ask and propose might bring to light something that another viewer hasn't even thought about, but they should be thinking about or talking about in their household. College planning, it's complex. And so that's why we're dedicating this month's topic to this. Like I said, drop your questions. We can't really get into specific household, but rest assured, all questions will be captured. If we don't address it today live on the webinar, your advisor and the Apella team will follow up with you. I think I've covered the basics. So without further ado, Jameson and Jim, if you could please introduce yourselves and tell us your experience and why college planning is your passion. It'd be great to kick us off.
Yeah, thanks, Stacey. I'll start. So my name is Jameson McAndy. I'm a financial advisor here at Apella. I'm also a CFP, Certified Financial Planner. The most important designation that I have for this topic is I'm a dad of 2. I've got a long way to go for college planning and paying for college, but a couple years ago, I thought this was a really interesting topic to get involved with, and Jim here is kind of the resident expert, so I started talking to him and learning more about it because again, I'm gonna have to figure it out at some point. I figured I'd get a jump on it, and with this or anything else, the earlier you can start, the better. The more you know, the better. And so I'm really excited to kind of share the information that we put together with everybody because it can be a confusing process. It's a stressful time of your life. It's kind of like the biggest hurdle you have, before retirement potentially. So, I don't think I can say enough nice things about Jim and how knowledgeable he is. And so, Jim, I think you should introduce yourself and kind of back everything up that I've said.
Thanks. Hopefully. Thanks, Jameson. Hello, everyone. My name is Jim Femia. I'm a senior financial advisor and the director of college planning for Apella Wealth. I have been an independent fee-only financial advisor for a very long time. I actually stopped counting once I hit 30 years. And I'm about to enter my 18th year of providing college planning services. Back when my daughter was a junior in high school, like many families, we were ill prepared for college at the time. So we ended up hiring a college advisor to help us through the process. And after working with them for a short period of time, it became clear to me pretty quickly that I had a lot of clients and friends and people that I knew in the community that could benefit from the service as well. And it was a great complement to my existing business. So I decided to jump in at that point. And over the years, the more college planning I do, the more I realize that the college planning and financial planning or retirement planning are really one and the same because the decisions you make on how you pay for college is really going to have a lasting impact on your own long-term financial plan. So that's why we work in this market to really help families navigate their way through this really important stage of their life.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. With that, shall we get started, guys?
Sounds good.
Awesome.
All right, Jameson. All right, so this probably isn't news, but college is one of the most significant financial decisions that you will make in your entire lifetime. There are many families that will use this point in time when they're about to make a major financial commitment towards education as an opportunity to get more serious about their long-term financial planning needs. In years past, I would tell families that paying for college is probably the second biggest decision of your life, right? Probably next to buying your home. But with today's costs, and over the last 2 decades, the cost of college continues to rise. It may actually end up being the most expensive decision of your life. You may have seen there's a group of schools who are either at or approaching $100,000 a year for a cost of attendance. That's right, $100,000 per year times 4 years. So you're talking $400,000 for an undergraduate degree for one student. So if you have 2 or 3 or more kids, you can see how this quickly becomes the most expensive decision of your life. Now, planning is going to allow for clarity and confidence. Like any goal-based planning that you're faced with, whether you're saving for a car, buying a home, saving for retirement, or college, the earlier you get started, the better. Most parents don't realize that they have an opportunity to project out what their net cost is at every single college in this country before their student even submits an application. So you should know before those applications go out, what's your budget? What are your projected net costs? What are your resources? Do I need to borrow money? What do those loan payments look like, et cetera? You don't want to make the mistake of winging it, folks, because that's when you can get into serious trouble. The stakes are way too high here.
Yeah, and like Jim, you're saying, $100,000 a year for college. That's like craziness, and you're not just saying that to scare people. Like we have numbers to back that up, and we'll kind of show what that looks like. Yeah, and this, we're kind of in the period of the slideshow where we're just trying to not necessarily scare people, but just make everyone aware. So, um, the impact that this process can have on parents and students is significant. Financial planning, no decision happens in a vacuum, right? So, if you pay more for college, um, maybe you have to work later, down the road to make your retirement plan work. So that's just kind of one example of it. So if there's loans that are being taken out, or the parents taking on the loans, or the students taking on the loans, right, that's going to have an impact on everyone's long-term plan as well. And some families are lucky enough where they have grandparents or other family members who maybe want to help out. And there's some unique opportunities in there, right? If you want to leave a legacy, college planning can be a real great opportunity for that. And I don't want to jump ahead too far, but it can have kind of an impact on the amount of financial aid that's going to be available to certain families. So the other thing is, it's hard to plan when things are constantly changing, which is what's happening in this landscape. The FAFSA, there was changes to that form that occurred in the last several years, and I think I read this is the first time since 2022 where October 1st is actually going to be the time where it's open and you can begin that process. They've changed the amount of questions from over 100 previously on that form to less than 50. There was a Secure 2.0 Act that was kind of specific to retirement, but within that, there was some changes to kind of college planning opportunities as well. And then most recently, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act went into effect. So that's going to kind of change loans that are going to start next year. And I can actually go to the next slide, which is an example of that. And
Yes. Speaking of the rules changing, right? There were quite a few important changes in the One Big Beautiful Bill, which may have a major impact not only on the cost of college, but on how parents pay for college. There had been rumors of them either modifying or eliminating the federal direct student loan, which used to be called the Stafford loan back in the day. But fortunately, they left that program untouched. So students can now still borrow up to $27,000 over a 4-year period. This is the only loan, the only college loan that students can get on their own without a cosigner. So if you want your student to have some skin in the game and participate at a certain level in the cost of college, this is the perfect way to do it. Current rate on this loan is 6.4%. It's a deferred loan, so the loan doesn't have to stop being paid back until you're 6 months out of college. So again, if you want your student to have some skin in the game, great way to do it. The one major change in the One Big Beautiful Bill is what they've done to Parent Plus loans. So up until this point, a parent could borrow as much as they needed to pay the college bill. So if you were short $50,000 one year, you could borrow that entire $50,000 from the federal government and then worry about paying back the federal government at a later date. So now under the One Big Beautiful Bill, they've actually put some limitations on that. So they have limited that now to $20,000 per student per year and a lifetime cap of $65,000 per student over a 4-year period. So if you borrow $20,000 freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, you only have $5,000 that are available to you through this program during your senior year. So I think some of these changes are going to force parents to be much more proactive and to sort of put together a 4-year program on how the heck we're going to pay this bill. The other major changes that were made were to some of the graduate borrowing programs. The Grad Plus program, which is similar to the Parent Plus program, again, you could borrow as much as you needed. They've eliminated that program totally. So that is no longer available. And with the graduate programs, same thing. There were some caps and they've lowered those caps. So again, from a planning perspective, you just need to know what your options are once the time comes to pay that bill.
Yeah, and Jim, why do you think they're making these changes, or kind of what's in their mind when they're trying to like reduce the amount that parents or students can borrow?
Well, a couple of things. I think the federal government is sort of uncomfortable covering the bill on a lot of these people that end up in default. That's one reason. But I think the other reason is, again, to control the cost, right? If colleges keep increasing their costs every year and people keep paying it because they're actually borrowing it, now they're capping the amount you can borrow. So we may find ourselves in a situation a year or two from now where they can't keep increasing the cost of college at this rate and maybe even start to decrease it. That's my hope.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think that brings us kind of to our next scary slide here, which is if you go from the left side of this screen, age 18, this is kind of like the average for what a family who has a senior is maybe going to pay. And so green is public in-state schools, yellow is out-of-state public schools, and then the blue is private. And again, these are average numbers. Like Jim was saying, there's the $100,000 schools that don't really show up on here. But for me personally, I go to the far right of this slide, and I've got a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I just add up kind of the green bars here, which is best case scenario, and I'm looking at $500,000 by the time they're both in college. So what am I supposed to do, I guess, is my question to you, Jim, and to Stacy.
Start collecting cans, Jameson.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'll tell that story real quick. There actually is in Oregon, you get a bottle deposit, 10 cents. And in Oregon, you can actually put that into a 529 plan. So no joke, I am doing that. Yeah.
Awesome.
10 cents at a time. So
yeah, I mean, and I look at this and I can say, I know from my experience, this chart is accurate for the 18 plus. And I mean, I have a freshman and a junior in college. So for this discussion, debate, conversation at my household is very fresh. And these numbers align with what we were seeing when my now college freshman was applying last year. So I think that, and if you look on here, the future cost of attendance is expected to inflate 5% per year. And I think, Jim, my guess is that's in line what you've seen as you've been planning with families. Is that right?
Like Jameson said, these are averages throughout the country. I'm here in the Northeast, and the cost of college here tends to be a whole lot more expensive maybe than other parts of the country. But I remember when I first started in the college planning space, I was maybe 2 or 3 years in. And I remember the first college that broke $60,000 a year. And I remember thinking to myself, that's $250,000 to send your kid to college. That just seems insane.
Mhm.
And then 4 or 5 years later, they broke 70. And then 4 or 5 years later, they broke 80. And, here we are at $100,000. And, people would ask me, when's it going to stop? And the answer is pretty simple. I think when people stop paying it, right? This is a business. It's all supply and demand. And once people stop paying $100,000 to send their kid to college, colleges are going to have to reevaluate.
Right, for sure.
Well, and I actually have some numbers to kind of back up this, inflation assumption for college. I remember I went back and kind of looked at a LinkedIn post that I had that was about University of Washington, right? So from 1997 to 2024, which is almost a 30-year period, the price increase at University of Washington was 5.2% a year was the average annual inflation. So 5%. You could look at this chart and say, well, that seems high compared to everything else. Maybe you think groceries is 3% or whatever you want to say.
Mhm.
Um, 5% is totally realistic, like Jim was
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
whenever we begin a new college planning engagement with the family, we always want to get answers to these two really important questions, because the reality is how you answer these questions is going to drive your strategy moving forward. Now, the first question that we always like to ask is, and this may seem crazy, it's not a rhetorical question, is controlling the cost of college important to you? And you may be saying, of course it's important. It's important to everyone. But you may actually be surprised by the number of parents who will tell me that cost isn't an issue. They'll say that, my son or daughter has worked really hard in high school. They've challenged themselves. They've done very well. They have big dreams. And they have a list of elite private schools that they want to apply to. And we're not going to let cost get in the way of that. They're going to apply. And if they get in, we'll figure it out. In my opinion, that's a dangerous approach, but my goal is just to educate folks. It's their decision, but in my opinion, it's a recipe for disaster. There's also families who have the resources, right? They've done a great job saving for college, whether it's in a 529 account or a brokerage account. Maybe they have really strong cash flow. So just from earned income, they're able to earmark certain dollars every month that they can use to pay the college bill. Maybe they have support from extended family again. So really minimizing cost or controlling cost isn't important to these families because they have the resources. They're comfortable with it. So their strategy is going to be very different from those families where cost is an issue. I also have a lot of parents that'll say there is no way I'm paying $90,000 a year or can afford to pay $90,000 a year to send my kid to college. So we need to target colleges who are likely going to provide us with financial aid or scholarships to help make the cost more manageable or more reasonable. So my follow-up question to them is always, okay, so if $90,000 is too much, what if I can get you to 80? And they'll say, that's not going to do it. Well, how about 70? How about 60? What is the right number? And I would suggest to everyone that in order to know what that right number is, you really need to go through a formalized financial plan, right? To see what fits in. How much do you have saved? How much can you pay through cash flow? If you need to borrow, how much can you afford to borrow? What do those loan payments look like? And ultimately, what is the long-term implication to your own retirement plan? So the first question is cost important? If it's not, then you can apply anywhere and everywhere. That's one approach. But if it is important, then we need a whole new strategy on identifying schools where you're likely to get some help.
Absolutely.
Any questions come up so far, Stacy, before I keep going?
Just one question. You have on here multiple children. Am I gonna get a deal if I have more than one kid in school?
Yeah, we'll
Two
actually
for
get to
one.
that in a little bit.
Okay.
Hang on to that question.
Yeah, okay,
Perfect.
that's a good
Right?
one.
It's a common one I get too.
Oh, absolutely. Um, so that's the first question. The second important question that needs to be answered is, are you going to be eligible for financial aid? And most parents will look at me and say, I don't know, that's why I'm here. Or they'll say, I don't think we're going to be eligible for any financial aid because I make too much or I've saved too much. The reality is every family is eligible for financial aid. The question becomes, do you want to take advantage of the financial aid that's made available to you? Okay. So at this point, it's important to understand that there are two specific types of financial aid. There's merit-based financial aid, which is all based on the student. And then there is need-based financial aid, which is all based on the finances of the family. So let me just take a minute talking about merit-based financial aid. So again, merit money is based on the strength of a student resume. And student resume is just a term that I happen to use. It's going to be your son or daughter's GPA, their SAT scores, their extracurricular activities, et cetera. And the stronger that resume, the more marketable the kid is. And colleges are going to compete for kids with strong resumes by offering merit money, free money that doesn't have to be paid back. So sometimes they'll call it a grant, sometimes they'll call it a scholarship. They may call it the Dean Award or the Presidential Award. I don't care what you call it. As long as it's free money that I don't have to pay back, I am interested. Now, there's two important things to know about merit. First off, every family or every student is eligible for merit-based financial aid. It has nothing to do with the finances of the family. The second important thing to know about merit is not all colleges offer merit-based money. So the last thing you want to have happen is have your rock star student apply to 6, 8, 10 schools. They get in, the financial aid award letters come in, and you say, I didn't get anything. Where's all my financial aid? And then you find out after the fact, the schools where you applied to do not even offer merit-based financial aid. All right, so there should be no surprises. When you get to this point in the process, there should be no surprises. If you're surprised that your college didn't offer merit-based aid, that's bad on you. That's additional research that you need to do before you submit that application. And again, the second type is called need-based financial aid, and Jameson's going to take us through this calculation.
Yeah, so unlike merit-based aid, like you were saying, like I've heard people say this, right? Bill Gates, Elon Musk, like their kids, they could apply to college and get merit-based aid. They probably wouldn't, but they could, right? Like it's not like need-based aid, which again is going to be based on the finances of the family. And there's this equation that everyone needs to get real familiar with, and then we're also going to kind of talk about the mechanics and what goes in to all of this. So this is the equation I'm talking about. This is what everybody should have in their brain, especially if you've got a kid who's in high school and this is kind of on your, you know, next 4 or 5 years. So this is cost of attendance, which is COA minus SAI. Is this enough acronyms for everybody so far? And SAI stands for Student Aid Index. And the difference between those numbers is going to be how much financial need-based aid a family is going to be eligible for. So cost of attendance, every school is going to publish that. It's going to include tuition. It's going to include, room and board, supplies, travel sometimes, like all those things get wrapped in to this number that's cost of attendance. And then your student aid index is what you're going to receive as a family once you go through the financial aid process. And again, the difference between those numbers is going to be the amount of need aid you're going to be eligible for. So far, no one knows what I'm talking about. That's kind of why I have some examples built into this slide, right? So let's
One
just,
question, Jameson, cost of attendance, isn't that available on each college and university's website? Isn't that one place where you can go and pull that information?
yeah, definitely. It should be pretty easy to find, like on every college's
Every
webpage.
college. So important for your student to pull as they're researching the schools and compiling their list.
Yeah, and also, you just want to do all this research because as we're going to go through this process, you're going to kind of see that the cost of attendance isn't necessarily what you're going to have to pay, right? So yeah, that number is there, but what does it mean? And that depends kind of on everybody's individual situation.
Okay.
So this is family one. They fill out their financial aid forms and they get a student aid index of $50,000. So what that means is that this family, every year their student is in school, they're expected to pay $50,000 out of their pocket. And this family is targeting kind of these three schools. School A, least expensive, 47,000, school B, 61,000, school C, most expensive. So what this looks like is any school that costs less than their student aid index, in this example, $50,000, the family is expected to just pay the full amount out of pocket every year. Now, schools where the cost of attendance is higher than the student aid index, that's where this family is potentially going to be eligible for need-based aid, right? And that's going to come in grants. It's going to come in the form of loans and work study. Obviously, you want the money that you don't have to pay back, right? But loans do count as financial aid. So $50,000, again, that's their student aid index. This is an income driven formula. So this is about $200,000 of income that this family has. So, they're $200,000, they're doing pretty good. That's why kind of, again, they're expected to fork over $50,000 a year. So that's family one. Family two goes through the financial aid forms and they get a student aid index of 85,000. So this family has, more income and more assets than the previous example family. So really, any school that this family is gonna target, they're gonna be kind of out of luck from a need-based aid standpoint. So I hope that kind of starts the process for why cost of attendance, minus student aid index is such an important equation to get to know. And again, what goes into that student aid index? Jim, this is
Yeah,
your
let's
time to
talk
shine,
about this
buddy. Yeah.
mysterious number, right? How is this
Yeah, yeah, it's like
SAI,
it's a little bit of a black box, isn't it?
how's this SAI being calculated? And I would suggest no matter what stage you're at, if you have kids in high school, junior high school, middle school, it's helpful to know what is your SAI because that tells you early on whether or not you're going to be eligible for any need-based financial aid. And you can start to craft a program to help hopefully make the cost of college a little bit easier for you. Like Jameson said, this SAI calculation is really an income-driven formula. Yes, assets will have an impact, but it's minimal when you compare it to the impact of income. So what will happen is you will pull out your most recent tax return, and on the front page of your 1040, line 11 is your adjusted gross income. That is by far the most important number in this SAI calculation. Now, it's important to note that you will be using your tax return from 2 years ago, okay, to do this calculation. So if you have a senior who's the class of 26, you'll be using your 24 tax return. If you have a current sophomore who's the class of 28, you'll be using your 2026 tax return. This is called your base year. And all of your financial aid will be driven off of your base year, the 1040 that you're using for that base year. Okay. Hopefully you can see here the importance of starting early, right? In a perfect world, we're meeting people who have students who are freshmen and sophomores because it gives us an opportunity to do some planning. If someone walks in my door right now and they're a class of 26, we're going to be using their 24 tax return. There's no planning opportunity, right? On the other hand, if someone walks in who's the class of 28, we'll be using next year's tax return to determine aid eligibility. So there may be some income planning, some asset repositioning opportunities that we could address to hopefully increase their eligibility for financial aid. So remember, you're looking at your 1040, line 11. The other thing this allows you to do, it allows you to avoid making mistakes on your tax return. And let me explain. So if you look at your 1040, like I said, line 11 is your adjusted gross income. That's the most important number. But line 11 is more than just earned income, right? If you look at the lines above it, line 1, if you're a W-2 employee, earned income, but then you have interest and dividends that are being generated during the course of your base year. That's going to increase your adjusted gross income. The other two things that come into play quite a bit will be capital gains. So capital gains are listed on line 7 of your 1040. So I had a client a few years ago. They were working with another advisor. They took a $30,000 capital gain during their base year. So not only did the family have to pay tax on that $30,000 capital gain, it also cost them about $14,000 in financial aid eligibility because it increased their AGI. Another
So,
area that comes up
sorry.
quite a bit is retirement planning distributions. Remember, every dollar you pull out of retirement is going to count as income, and it's going to increase your adjusted gross income. So I had someone last year who took out $50,000 from an IRA that they had to do some home renovations. So not only did it increase their adjusted gross income and their tax due for 23, it also cost them about $23,000 in financial aid. So you really need to focus on how do I best position myself during that base year? And the best way to do that is to start early, to understand how the system works. So that's
So,
that.
Jim, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but one question we got is, it sounds like you can estimate what it is based on your tax return, but how does the official SAI get calculated? Who does that? Or are we going to talk about that a little bit later?
The Department of Education. So when we file FAFSA,
Okay.
the folks at FAFSA, the Department of Education, actually do that calculation for you. So
Okay.
when you submit FAFSA, you're going to give all your data, your income, your assets, et cetera, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And they're going to tell you what your student aid index is. But what I'm here to say is we can run projections on what your student aid index is likely to look like. And that allows us to do a lot of planning beforehand.
Okay. Super
Okay.
helpful. Thank you.
Right.
So that's
And I,
income. Go ahead,
oh,
James.
sorry, Jim, because I think this is an important point, and I was just gonna add something and then maybe ask a question too about kind of income and your tax return and all those fun things. So, your your first base year is like what you were talking about. It's 2 years looking back, but every year your student is in school, you're going to be going through the FAFSA. So it's kind of this like 4-year process. So 4 years of tax returns. So that's kind of a period of time where you don't want to do anything crazy income wise, right?
Exactly.
And
100%.
then, and you talked about, like there's ways to inflate your income, right? Like the inherited IRA, for example, like you have a kind of a clock right now. So if you took a bunch of money out of an IRA, that's going to drive your income up. But are there ways to potentially do the opposite, which is drive your income down and then maybe make this look a little better from an income standpoint?
Right. Yeah. One way is contribute to retirement plans, right? So if you're contributing to your company sponsored 401k, 403b, that's going to lower your adjusted gross income and increase your eligibility for financial aid. That was a recent change in the 2023 FAFSA Simplification Act.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's helpful. So now I will let you continue. Thank you for answering that.
Yeah, no worries. So the next thing that'll have to be reported will be parent assets. So the good news here is retirement assets do not work against you in this SAI calculation. So any money you have in 401k, 403b, SEP, Simples, IRAs, Roths do not work against you in this calculation. Personal property also does not have to be reported. So, cars, boats, jewels, things like that. If any of you own annuities that are in the accumulation phase, so you're not taking income from the annuity, it's just growing, it's accumulating, that is also deemed to be a retirement asset and does not have to be reported. For those of you that have cash value life insurance, whether it's a whole life policy, universal life, variable life, those policies all come with a savings component. Those assets also do not have to be reported. Okay, so that's the good news. The bad news is everything else needs to be reported. So, any money that you have in checking, savings, CDs, brokerage accounts, 529 plans, any non-retirement asset will have to be reported on the financial aid forms. If anyone owns a second home, whether it's an income property or a vacation home, any equity in that additional piece of property will also have to be counted as an asset. Just be aware that these assets are only counted at 5.64%. So if you've saved $100,000 in a 529 plan, your aid eligibility is only decreasing by about $5,600, right? So in my opinion, I'd rather have $100,000 in a 529 plan that I can use to pay for college than hopefully trying to increase my aid eligibility by $5,600. Two other quick points on income and assets. So like I said, with income, you're reporting your income from 2 years ago. With assets, you're actually reporting the value of those assets on the date that you submit your financial aid forms. So if we decide to file FAFSA on November 1st and our CSS profile on November 1st, we're valuing the assets at that particular point in time. There's no look back on assets.
So that, yeah, I mean, sorry if I interject again, Jim here. So, not that everyone's going to be in this situation, but there could potentially be like some opportunity there, right? Before you file your aid forms, if you maybe have things that are in accounts that are less ideal for this calculation, there's maybe some massaging you can do ahead of time.
Exactly. If it makes a difference.
Right.
I mean, if your income's $300,000, it really doesn't matter what you have for assets, right?
Yeah, then your
You're not
family
gonna
too, and you're
qualify
out of luck.
anyways.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim, one question we got is, and I think this is something that might have changed in the FAFSA update, is how does home equity factor into these calculations?
Okay, so if the college only requires the FAFSA, they do not count home equity as an asset, does not come into play at all. If the college requires the CSS profile, which we'll talk about in a little bit, they will ask you about home equity. And colleges will count the amount of home equity at different levels. Like Brown, as an example, a few years ago decided we are not going to count home equity at all in our need calculations. They're totally going to leave it out. Where we have other colleges that'll say, you have $500,000 in home equity, but we're only going to count 1 times income of that. So if you're making 150 grand, you have $500,000 worth of equity, but they're going to cap it at 150 or 1 times your income. So this is where it gets really tricky because every college, especially on the private college side, has all these different policies and different rules and regulations that they're ruled by.
Sorry. And one other question, just because you mentioned parent 529. What happens if the 529 is actually owned by the grandparent? Does that get entered into this calculation?
Yeah, so that was a change that was made in the Simplification Act of 23. Up until that point, yes, grandparent owned or any family member owned 529 plan would have to be reported. FAFSA is no longer penalizing you for having grandparent owned 529 plans.
Perfect.
That's FAFSA. CSS profile, okay, they will ask you and they will still count the asset.
Okay. And I know we're going to talk in a little bit later, FAFSA versus CSS profiles. So
yeah, and I was just going to say, so for all the grandparents who are watching this, open that 529, for the parents and the students. It's like one of the best things you can do.
Absolutely, and for more reasons than that, right?
Yeah,
which we'll talk about. The other thing that's going to go into this SAI calculation is student income. So again, if your student filed a tax return, remember from 2 years ago, you'll need to provide the student income information. Now, the good news is they give the students a safe harbor on this, so the students are allowed to earn up to about $11,500 before it begins to work against you in the calculation. And the last thing that'll have to be reported is student assets. So if your son or daughter has bank accounts, or you have UGMA or UTMA accounts where the parent's listed as the owner or the custodian and the student is listed as the beneficiary, those are deemed to be student assets. And unfortunately, student assets get counted at 20 to 25% of the value versus 5.6% of parent assets. So kids are really penalized for having a lot of money in their name when it comes to filing for financial aid.
Is that any assets, or do students who've been smart and got ahead and opened Ross, do those count against the student?
So retirement assets do not count, even for students.
Even for students? Okay,
Yep,
it's great
correct.
to know.
One of the biggest mistakes we see parents make when they're filing their FAFSA is they'll report their 529 plans as a student asset and not as a parent asset, right? And that makes sense. The 529 is really for the student. They're listed on the account. So they report this $100,000 as a student asset. Well, you just increased your student aid index by $20,000, not realizing that it should be reported as a parent asset at 5.6%. That was a $15,000 mistake, folks.
Yeah. So that's a big PSA, is put those as a parent asset.
Right, exactly.
Absolutely.
So, kind of going back to the example I went through, right? So there's a family that maybe they have a student aid index that is so high that they're not going to be eligible to receive any need, but just because a family can, I'm going to put this in quotes, afford to pay $100,000 a year to send their student to some of these schools that are in the triple digits, does that mean that they, necessarily want to fork all that over every year for 4 years? Not necessarily.
Some people say they're fine with it, but I've never seen someone pen a check for like 90 grand and be happy about it.
Yeah.
But if you are in that situation where you're not going to qualify for need, the only way to reduce your cost is to target schools that have a lower sticker price or who offer merit-based financial aid. And merit-based aid is generally going to come directly from the private colleges that have endowments above and beyond the state and local funds that they can use to attract top students. Some state schools will have a little bit of merit money that they can throw at kids, especially top students. But for the most part, the largest amounts of merit money are going to come from the private schools. Also important to note that this merit money is awarded on a first come, first served basis. All right, it's not a race. You don't have to get everything in on day one, but it's crucially important that you do not miss an admissions deadline or a financial aid deadline when it comes to merit, because they have a certain pot of money that they're going to use every year. And once that pot's gone, it's gone until the following year. So do not miss a deadline. And I'm going to say that a few more times before we end. And then finally, a lot of these colleges who offer merit will give preferential packaging to students who are in the top 25% of the applicant pool, right? So you can take a look at a college and take a look at their existing student population and see what was the average GPAs and SAT scores of the students that are currently there, and then compare your students' GPA and SAT scores to those to see, are they going to be in the top 25% of the applicant pool? So, if the average GPA for a particular school is between 1,100 and 1,200, and your kid has a 1,300, chances are they're going to receive even more merit-based aid because the college wants to attract them to that college.
Got it. And do all private colleges, I'm thinking of Notre Dame, right? That's a big school, big private Catholic university. But my understanding is they don't offer merit, only need-based. So just because they're private doesn't mean that they offer merit. Is there a place to go to find a list of schools that do offer merit awards?
Absolutely. We're going to touch on that in just a few slides when we wrap up.
Sorry, I'm anxious again.
That's
I
okay.
get my brain gets spinning on these things.
Well, and kind of to tack on to that question with a point, if you're one of those really, if you're like one of the Ivy League schools, right? Do you feel like, I guess, do you need to entice kids with merit aid if you're that school, right? Like everyone who's applying to that school is going to be probably a pretty good student, a good athlete, a good citizen, however you want to categorize it.
Yeah, just think that the more difficult the school is to get into on the admission side of things, the less likely they are to offer merit. So all the Ivy League schools, no merit. all the schools from the NESCAC, the New England Small College Association up here in New England, small privately owned colleges, your Bowdoin, Bates, Wesleyan, Tufts, those type of schools. I mean, I could go up and down the East Coast, BC, Georgetown, Emory, Johns Hopkins, University of Chicago, Northwestern. Those schools are incredibly difficult to get into. And they have all made the determination, we are not going to give merit-based aid. Because who would we give it to, right? Every kid that's applying to the school is a rock star. So they've made the determination, the only financial aid we're going to give is based on need. So if you're in a position where you qualify, you go through the exercise, right? COA minus SAI equals need. If you're eligible for a lot of need and you're a really good student, you're in a really good position to get a significant financial aid package from one of those top schools.
So we,
Oh, sorry, did I skip ahead, Stacy? Do you have a question before I?
nope, I think this was going to be my next, as we put it together, can we chat a little bit about the difference between the FAFSA and the CSS profile?
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that. All right, so we've kind of talked about each of these, but the FAFSA, so that opens October 1st. First filing again when your student is a senior, the fall is the first time you're going to do it. You're going to do it every year after that while the student is in college. Even if you think you're not going to get any need-based aid, you just need to go through this exercise to fill out the form. 4 years is a long time. Things can change. So you just want to make sure that you're filing the form, because you're not going to be eligible for any federal loans along the way if you don't fill out these forms. And then again, the student aid index, it actually comes from this form, and it's going to be available like immediately, right, Jim? It's gonna come out to you. You're going to kind of know. And I think a lot of parents probably see that number and they're in disbelief. So again, it's like, that's why you want to plan ahead and at least know what you're getting into. Because you'd hate to go through that process and then you're like, well, I wish I would have gone 2 years back and not, sold my house or whatever you did to kind of inflate your numbers there. So the CSS profile, unlike the FAFSA, you're going to have to fill it out for every school. The CSS profile is in addition to the FAFSA, and this is going to be at about 250 schools. The CSS profile, you can go on their website and there's a really good filter there, so you can look by state, and it's pretty easy to find any school where you're going to need to fill out this form. And the difference between the FAFSA, like I said, the FAFSA now is less than 50 questions. The CSS profile, they just want a lot more information from you, and they're going to factor in things like home equity potentially, and just things that the FAFSA isn't necessarily going to take into consideration. And then to make this even more complicated, you get one student aid index from the FAFSA, and you get a different student aid index from the CSS profile. And then within the CSS profile schools, all of those schools can have their own kind of way that they calculate that number. So again, that's why you want to go through, and we're going to kind of talk about how we, plan for that. We can actually kind of pull all these numbers together.
Awesome.
So it's already September 10th. So if you have a senior, this is coming up quick. October 1st is when the FAFSA opens. I wouldn't be on the website at midnight the day before, but just make sure you kind of get on it. November 1st is going to be early action, early decision. And then in the spring is kind of the decision for all the other schools, and maybe when you're actually going to pay the bill. And so the process for people who have seniors right now is going to be very deadline driven. Every school is going to have their own deadlines. So if you're a spreadsheet person, if it's your calendar, if you are pen and paper, just make sure that you have everything in one place and that you can keep track of it. And also a lot of the schools will communicate directly with the students, so like make sure these things aren't going to their spam, or that your kid is just staying on top of it. Because I don't have a senior, but I can only imagine what they're like. But
I can confirm that's a true statement.
yeah, that's what I figured.
So regarding staying organized, I always recommend to all the parents to make a list of every school where your son or daughter is applying, go to the website, find out exactly which financial aid forms are required at that. Everyone's going to have the FAFSA. Some are going to have the CSS profile. There's actually a group of schools that have their own institutional forms as well. So in some cases, you could be dealing with 3 forms, right? And then you want to record the deadline for each of those schools. Now, I will say if your student is applying early, whether it's early action or early decision, the financial aid deadline may be earlier as well. The earliest deadline that you will typically face if you're applying early somewhere will be November 1st. So the recommendation I usually give is if you're applying somewhere early with a November 1st deadline, just get all of your financial aid stuff submitted by that November 1st deadline. That way, every school has it, you're done with it, and now you're just waiting for feedback from colleges looking for some additional information. It's going to make your life a lot easier.
And like how do we as planners, Jim, like forecast costs and build a list? How does anyone else do that? I know there's lots of calculators online that you can go and kind of enter your information and just get like a rough estimate.
Right. Yeah. So again, this really has to do with calculating your student aid index. That's the most important thing for you to do. Unfortunately, you can just go to Google and do a search on student aid calculators, and you'll get dozens upon dozens of options out there. But let me save you some time and cut through the noise and give you a couple of recommendations. Studentaid.gov is the federal website that you'll be using to file your FAFSA. So you might as well get familiar and comfortable with this site because you're going to be spending a lot of time on it during the college years. So studentaid.gov, in the search box, just type in SAI estimator or aid estimator. It should bring you right to their calculator. And it'll ask you a series of financial questions. Just answer the questions and it should generate an SAI estimate for you. Same idea with College Board. Again, for those of you that are going to be applying to one of those 250 private schools, the CSS profile is available through College Board. So same thing, collegeboard.com, go into the search box, do a search on SAI estimator. I think there's something on their homepage too that's like called the financial aid quiz. Just touch on that. Same thing, it'll walk you through all the questions. It'll give you an estimate. Another site that I happen to like is savingforcollege.com. They do a great job in the 529 plan market. They do rankings, and there's a nice, easy to use SAI calculator there. I would also recommend that you check out our friends at College Aid Pro, who offer a ton of free resources, as well as a great SAI calculator, not only for the federal SAI calculator, but they also will provide you with an institutional or CSS profile SAI estimate, along with net costs from every college that you plan on applying to. It'll organize everything for you, including merit-based information. So you just asked about where can I find merit-based information? Mm-hmm. It's all available through College Aid Pro. They also host a number of educational webinars during the course of the year on a whole bunch of different topics. We've been using the advisor version of this software for a number of years. We were part of their beta group and love it. It's integral in the work that we do. So if you're a do-it-yourselfer or you're just looking to learn at this point, I'd recommend you set up a free account with College Aid Pro, get familiar with their different programs. They also have an upgraded service for even more information, and it's peanuts per month. Just remember, though, the families who we work with at Apella are typically looking for a more comprehensive approach, right? We always say that college planning should not be done in a vacuum. It should be part of a sort of a holistic approach where we're not only doing your college planning work, we're making sure you're on track for retirement, we're doing tax planning, we're doing legacy planning, we're doing investment management work. But again, if you're a do-it-yourselfer, I would definitely check out College Aid Pro. It's a good resource.
Yeah, and kind of piggybacking on that's like the specific software that we use at our firm. Like Jim was saying, you can go into it and put your information in, your students' information in, and it's going to generate what you're actually going to pay, right? Because what this is kind of illustrating here is a condensed version of what we would go through. But this is kind of a case study. This student class of 2027, they have one sibling, which again isn't going to make a huge difference for what the family is expected to pay. The students, there's no income. The adjusted gross income for this family is $150,000. They've got $130,000 in non-retirement savings. So that could be a bank account, a CD, a brokerage account, 529, whatever it is. That's $130,000 altogether. And then there's $400,000 in home equity. So this family's federal student aid index, that's the bold number if you kind of go to the bottom of the screen, $38,000, right? So again, that's what the family is expected to pay. And then their institutional index, which is from the CSS profile, you see there's a range there because as I mentioned, all of those schools can make their own calculation. So that's 14,000 to 26,000, right? So if I'm thinking as a family, like I can send my students somewhere and pay $14,000, or I can send them somewhere and spend $38,000. I'm going to choose one over the other most times, but obviously you're going to have to make that decision as a family. So going back up here, I just want everyone to look at the cost of attendance, right? That's what the school is posting on their website. And then if you go over to the next row to the right, the net cost, right? So if I look at like Harvard on this list, 17,000 versus 94,000, that's a huge difference. I'm not going to know that unless I kind of go through this process in advance. Because if I have to, spend $94,000 a year, I don't think I'm going to send my student to Harvard. In my situation, at least, can't speak for other people. But $17,000, that's pretty palatable to send my student to Harvard. So, that's just kind of an example. And again, this is what we would do for any family who was trying to forecast their costs ahead of time based on their financial situation. And I know, Stacy, I was going to say, I know we're kind of getting up to 5 Eastern here. So
yeah, exactly. We're coming up on top of the hour. Maybe there are a couple questions that I've gotten, but is there anything that we should be highlighting as we wrap up? And I can get you these couple questions.
Yeah, let's do the questions.
Okay, perfect. I'll rapid fire this. Does a loan, mortgage, second mortgage, or home equity reduce the home equity less for the CSS profile? Should you take on borrowing to reduce home equity or other financial strategies for the CSS profile?
What a good question.
Yeah, I love it.
The question is, what are you doing with the home equity? So if you actually pull out home equity and put it in your savings account, you're not accomplishing anything.
Right.
Right? It's getting counted the same way.
Fair point. Planning is appropriate.
Yeah.
Do I understand correctly that while our child is in college for 2 more years, we should not sell a piece of land because of capital gains, etc.? Is it better to get a student loan and pay that off later when the loan is sold post-graduation?
Sounds like a good strategy to me.
That's
another
what I
good
thought
question.
Too.
Wow.
I love it. I love it.
Smart
And then
people in here.
referring back to the top of the hour when you said students can get 27,000 over 4 years with the 6.4% deferred. Where can our college junior get that loan? Do you get it by reapplying or redoing the FAFSA every year?
Yep. All you need to do is file FAFSA. If you file FAFSA, every student is eligible for, well, as a junior, it'll be $6,500.
Right. And I think that gets back to your point that it's important to apply every year, even if you don't think you're going to qualify for the need-based aid. It opens up other opportunities.
Yeah, so if they have 2 more years, junior year and senior year, it'll be $7,500 per year. So they'll be able to borrow $15,000. Unfortunately, you can't go back and take the money that was offered to you freshman and sophomore year. It's a use it or lose it loan.
Use it or lose it provision. So file the FAFSA to take advantage of it every year.
Exactly.
All right. Any
think I was
other?
just gonna kind of flip to the end here, and then maybe we could kind of wrap this up. So, and there are materials that'll be provided after the fact. So if we, we're gonna skip over one slide specifically, but we can, provide that later and answer questions.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna.
All right.
Yeah, so like we've been saying, the earlier you get started, the better, more opportunities you'll have to, not only get involved in a savings program, but hopefully, massage that base year and put yourself in a situation where you can qualify for some more free money. For those of you that are clients of Apella, please reach out to your advisor, and schedule a call to review your situation. We're happy to hop on a call with any of you. If anyone's on the call who is not working with Apella and maybe working with another advisor, same thing, I would recommend you want to reach out to that advisor and you want to put a plan into place. Again, you need to understand, how are we going to pay this bill? Is there anything we can do to minimize costs, et cetera? And if the advisor is unable to help them, you need to make a decision. You need to figure this out on your own, or you need to find an advisor that can help you navigate your way through that. As a courtesy to everyone in this call, we do offer a free consultation. So again, take advantage of it. Happy to talk with any of you and answer any questions that you may have.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I think we're just past the top of the hour. I appreciate everyone hanging out with us for a little extra time. As you can see, we're super passionate here at Apella about college planning and help navigate the decisions, being efficient today and well into the future. Hopefully you've enjoyed our time with us. We do have these webinars every month. We will have one October, November, December. October Cybersecurity Month. Look for that coming into your email. November, we will be talking about charitable giving and efficient giving with Charles Schwab. And we will be talking about generational wealth December 10th. So generational wealth, 529s, grandparents utilizing those is a way to support the next generation with this. Thank you all for attending. We did record this webinar. It will go out in about a week once it's prepared for distribution. And also it will live on the Apella website under our events tab, just as with all of our past webinars. So again, for those questions that were submitted that were a little more specific, we will be following up with those. Or your advisor will be. At any rate, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have. Jim, Jameson, thank you for lending your expertise to this topic. I greatly appreciate it. And we look forward to speaking with you all soon. Have a great day.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good day.